Hi everyone, my name is Apuraj Garikapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abhi. Recognizing the infamous weapon, Theo knew it had belonged to the tyrannical former family head responsible for massacring thousands, before being killed by Kyle himself. Sensing his reaction, Kyle questioned whether information about the Mad Dragon had been missing from Theo's previous life. That single question shattered Theo's composure. He had been exposed. Kyle's eyes glowed with murderous intent as overwhelming pressure filled the battlefield. He openly admitted his hatred for regressors, believing they selfishly treated the world like a chessboard that could be reset whenever they pleased. For that reason, he had vowed to personally kill every regressor he discovered. This was never a simple task. It was an execution, even without beating a regressor himself. Kyle's terrifying power overwhelmed Theo completely. He ordered Theo to wield the sword, explaining that surviving its resentment would earn him recognition. However, he would only acknowledge Theo Ragnar the human while erasing the regressor from existence. When Theo asked what that truly meant, Kyle explained that everyone Theo had saved or met because of his regression would disappear entirely. They would cease to exist. Theo instinctively clenched his fists. Although he longed for his father's acknowledgement, accepting those conditions was impossible. Kyle gave him only two choices: die by refusing, or survive as the sixth successor. After cleansing himself of his past, without hesitation, Theo rejected the offer with every fiber of his being. The rejection was answered immediately. Kyle launched a devastating attack that sent Theo flying across the graveyard as blood stained the snow. The overwhelming gap and strength between father and son remained obvious. Kyle condemned him for allowing emotions to cloud his judgment, claiming he was no different from every other regressor. Before striking him down once again, he questioned whether Theo intended to rely on regression whenever things became difficult. Struggling back onto his feet, Theo firmly declared that his father had misunderstood him completely. Everything he had accomplished until now was not to escape responsibility, but to protect everything that had been destroyed because of him. If earning acknowledgement required abandoning all of that, then he would rather throw away the acknowledgement itself. As his determination intensified, every sword planted throughout the graveyard began resonating with his resolve. Swerving that he would one day surpass his father, Theo charged forward with everything he had. Kyle effortlessly blocked the attack, releasing enough power to make the very sky appear as though it were cracking apart. Even after Kyle seized his arm, Theo utilized the abilities granted by his newly acquired guardians to maneuver through the raging storm of swords, finally landing a shallow but meaningful cut across his father's body. The battlefield fell silent behind Kyle. The colossal dragon spirit remained motionless, but the mad dragon swords suddenly shot forward and pierced Theo. Though the impact shook him to his core, he remained standing, bruised, battered, and bleeding. His will refused to break. Watching everything unfold, Robert Ragnar admitted that he had never expected Theo to fight back. Kyle quietly replied that Theo was unlike every other regressor they had encountered. Previous regressors had treated everyone around them as disposable tools, but Theo wielded his sword solely to protect others. For the first time, a faint smile appeared on Kyle's face. Officially acknowledging regressor Theo Ragnar, he declared him the sixth successor of the Ragnar family. As proof of that recognition, Kyle bestowed upon him the Mad Dragon sword, explaining that it had once belonged to his own father, who had also been a regressor. Although they shared the same origin, they had walked entirely different paths, and Kyle expressed genuine curiosity to see where Theo's path would ultimately lead. A brilliant pillar of light immediately enveloped Theo, transporting him into complete darkness. Before revealing the unfamiliar sight of a modern city at night, people quietly waited at a bus stop, while his own reflection stared back from a glass window, the face of his weak past self, believing everything was finally over. Theo suddenly awoke inside a luxurious bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows as he found his mother Cecilia smiling warmly beside him. She explained that the family head had personally carried his unconscious body home the previous night. Shocking everyone at that moment, Theo realized the brutal life or death confrontation had been nothing more than Kyle's test. Soon afterward, Evelyn entered alongside Captain Julius, who congratulated Theo for passing the family head's trial. While he was still processing everything, Evelyn excitedly revealed that the entire kingdom was talking about him. Outside newsboys loudly announced the headline that Ragnar's sixth official successor had finally been chosen. The announcement quickly spread across the other successor candidates. One welcomed the new competition with excitement. Another mysterious woman standing beneath a full moon became intrigued, while a shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat angrily crumpled the newspaper. Far away in another frozen wasteland, a warrior and a tattered cloak listened as his subordinate Ian complained that Theo had become the newest successor and regretted not bringing him into the Black Ian cavalry. Her captain Theo Ragnar calmly told her not to blame herself, keeping his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The Black Ian cavalry captain quietly spoke Theo's name before deciding that the time had finally come to meet this remarkable newcomer. While Theo Ragnar focused on recovering, the entire political landscape shifted through bloodshed and betrayal. Strongholds fell, heads rolled, and chaos spread across the continent. After refusing to answer the Draker family summons within the allotted time, the Trovan family had effectively declared war. That very night, the 9 dragons gathered for an emergency council meeting. It had become painfully clear that Ed Trovan's rebellion wasn't something he threw together overnight. He had been laying the groundwork. For years, the council also suspected that the suspicious movements of the northern warlords were connected to his scheme. However, not everyone shared the same sense of urgency. Some of the older, more traditional elders dismissed the northern threat entirely and instead pushed to fill the Sky Dragon's vacancy. Others wanted to reopen the long-delayed discussion about the clan's succession. Surprisingly, Robert Ragnar, the Black Dragon, agreed that the succession issue needed to be settled immediately. If the heirs started fighting each other while a major war was approaching, the Ragnar clan could collapse from within. The conservative elders immediately criticized the proposal, calling it inappropriate, until another of the 9 dragons calmed the meeting. Rather than arguing endlessly, he proposed gathering all the key figures at an upcoming event before deciding the clan's next course of action. Meanwhile, Theo spent his recovery period training inside Lord Brock's lair after getting completely overwhelmed by his father. Although the wounds Kyle Ragnar had inflicted were still visible, Theo had never felt stronger physically. Every movement was sharper, faster, and more precise than before. With flawless swordsmanship, he cut down an entire formation of candles in a single sequence. His body had recovered remarkably, but his mind was a different story. The lingering voices from the Mad Dragon Emperor's half-sword continued invading his thoughts, whispering for him to kill anyone who stood in his way and surrender to his deepest instincts. The more he trained, the louder those murderous impulses became. Despite that, Theo admitted the cursed sword wasn't entirely a burden. Thanks to those lingering traces, he had briefly glimpsed the realm once reached by the Mad Dragon Emperor himself. As he finished training, Lord Brock appeared and immediately noticed the strain those voices were putting on him. Theo confessed everything, explaining that although he could still control himself, the constant interference worried him. Lord Brock understood better than anyone, because the Mad Dragon Emperor was the one who had stolen her heart long ago. Seeing Theo overthinking everything again, she reminded him not to rush ahead. Last time he charged into something beyond his limits, he nearly died. There was still time to grow stronger. Before sending him away, Lord Brock personally examined the arm that had been reattached by the High Priest to make sure it had healed properly. Satisfied with the results, she jokingly scolded Theo for constantly leaving her nest a mess whenever he trained there. Cleaning up after him had practically become part of her routine. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing High grow naturally. Back at Camellia Palace, Theo was greeted by an excited Sibildry, one of his biggest supporters. Sybil personally delivered an invitation from Daffodil Palace to attend the grand banquet, celebrating Ray Ragnar's 18th birthday. Even Sybil found the timing strange. With war looming on the horizon, throwing a lavish celebration seemed completely out of place. Rumors suggested it would be one of the grandest events the clan had hosted in years. Theo immediately saw the hidden meaning behind it. This wasn't just a birthday banquet, it was a carefully planned political stage. After Ed Troivan's betrayal, the Ragnar clan's internal balance had been completely shaken. Action's death had moved Theo into the position of 6th successor, while the Sky Dragon's treason had left a massive power vacuum among the 9 dragons. The banquet would serve 2 purposes at once. Outwardly, It would show rival factions that the Ragnar clan remained strong despite recent events. Behind the scenes, it would allow every successor and their supporters to size each other up before the coming storm. Sybil was amazed that Theo had already seen through the event's true purpose. Hearing that his idol would stand at the center of such an important gathering only made him more excited. As for Theo, if the clan's most influential figures wanted to see what he was capable of, then he intended to give them a performance they would never forget. The Daffodil Palace looked breathtaking beneath the winter sky. Inside its massive banquet hall, nobles from every influential family connected to the Ragnar clan gathered beneath dazzling chandeliers, enjoying expensive wine, luxurious food, and political conversations disguised as casual small talk. The atmosphere instantly changed the moment Theo Ragnar stepped through the doors. Conversations died, glasses stopped halfway to people's lips, and every pair of eyes turned toward the newest successor dressed in elegant, dark winter attire, with an icy gaze to match. Theo completely stole the room. His entrance was flawless, and he knew it. Slowly scanning the hall, he made sure every influential noble was watching. Everyone understood that Ragnar's birthday was only an excuse. The real reason they had gathered was to see the young man who had suddenly climbed into the line of succession. Theo had every intention of making an unforgettable first impression. As if on cue, another familiar figure entered behind him and made that impression even stronger. Theo heard calm, confident footsteps before Navanbakis greeted him with perfect respect, loudly addressing him as my lord, so the entire banquet hall could hear. Theo couldn't help but smile. He barely recognized Novan, the man who had stubbornly kept his beard even during his sham wedding, had finally cleaned himself up, looking every bit the dignified family head. Around the hall, whispers immediately spread. Everyone already knew about the fall of the Bakis family and how Navan had emerged as its sole survivor and new patriarch. Despite everything, the Bakis clan still remained one of Ragnar's 6 pillars. Seeing its new leader openly pledge respect to the 6th successor caused exactly the kind of stir Theo had hoped for. Sometimes, a perfectly timed entrance and a few carefully chosen words were enough to shake an entire room. But before Theo could continue speaking with Navan, both of their instincts suddenly screamed in warning. A mountain of a man had somehow walked right behind them without either of them noticing. The giant introduced himself with an easy smile as the 5th successor, Thorkel Ragnar, commander of the Black Iron Cavalry. Theo immediately recognized him. This was one of his greatest rivals. Towering over everyone nearby, Thorkel casually extended a hand for a friendly handshake. Every noble in the room silently watched, knowing they were witnessing the first meeting between the former leading heir and the rapidly rising successor. Thorkel smiled warmly, insisting there was no reason for Theo to stay so tense. He claimed he simply wanted to meet the young genius everyone had been talking about. He even joked that he was relieved action had been removed from the picture, saying Theo was a far more suitable choice to receive the patriarch's recognition. On the surface, his words sounded sincere, but Theo trusted them about as much as he trusted a snake. In the Ragnar clan, where only strength earned respect, no true rival welcomed another with genuine kindness. Even so, Theo accepted the handshake, while politely complimenting Thorkel as the famous commander of the Black Iron Cavalry, suddenly reminding everyone that he himself belonged to the White Armored Dragon Cavalry. Thorkel immediately caught the hidden message. Smiling even wider, he tightened his grip in an instant. An overwhelming aura exploded from his body, crashing down on Theo with crushing force. To everyone watching, it looked like nothing more than a respectful greeting between brothers. In reality, Thorkel was using raw pressure to demonstrate the massive gap between them. The force became so overwhelming that Theo was driven down onto one knee. Still smiling, Thorkel calmly told him to relax and suggested he start calling him Big Brother from now on. It was a perfect display of how the Ragnar clan truly operated. Every smile hid a challenge, and every greeting was another battlefield. But Theo refused to stay down. Gritting his teeth, he fought against the suffocating pressure, forcing himself back onto his feet through sheer willpower. Thorkel's eyes widened in surprise. The young successor actually possessed enough strength to resist his aura. Standing tall once again, Theo smiled back and calmly addressed him as brother, proving that he had no intention of losing the very first clash between them. On the other side of the banquet hall, the Lonka siblings had finally arrived, and Hulkus was already complaining about being forced to wear a suit. Erica was doing everything she could to repair their family's reputation for acting like a bunch of barbarians, but her giant brother clearly wasn't making the job any easier. While Hulkus suffered through the formal outfit, another familiar face stepped into the hall. Remington Narso, the Silver Lion, had arrived. Over the past few months, the handsome prodigy from the West had become one of the hottest rising stars in the clan, with many people even claiming he was starting to rival the Ascendant Dragon. Despite all the praise, Remington hadn't changed one bit. He remained humble as ever, and had traveled all the way north just to catch up with Theo and ask how life in the White Armor Dragon Cavalry had been treating him. Unfortunately, Lady Ray happened to overhear the conversation. Realizing he had accidentally ignored the birthday girl, Remington instantly turned into a guilty puppy and apologized over and over again. Ray simply laughed, knowing full well that everyone had gathered here for reasons much bigger than her birthday. Before the conversation could continue, an overwhelming pressure spread across the banquet hall. Two monstrous auras collided in the center of the room, instantly grabbing everyone's attention. The Lana siblings didn't even need to look to know Theo had somehow gotten involved whenever chaos broke out. He always seemed to be at the center of it. On the surface, Theo and Theo Ragnar were simply greeting each other with a polite handshake. In reality, their auras were violently clashing beneath the surface, forcing everyone nearby to instinctively keep their distance. After a brief stalemate, Thorkel let go of Theo's hand and burst into laughter, joking that he wasn't a match for his little brother and surrendering on the spot. Theo immediately returned the respect, insisting he had only gained the upper hand because Thorkel had guided him. Thorkel smiled and pointed out that being too humble could sometimes come across as insulting, then admitted his praise was completely genuine. If they had fought at the same age, Theo would have won decisively. Coming from the most decorated young genius of Ragnar's recent generation, those words carried tremendous weight. Genuinely impressed, Thorkel raised a glass and called on every noble present to celebrate Ragnar's newest rising star. Once the applause resumed, he casually asked Theo whether the grand debut he had orchestrated for the clan's new successor had met his expectations. Theo thanked him, but immediately saw through what Thorkel was really doing. Beneath the relaxed smile and easygoing personality was an incredibly calculating man. By displaying his own overwhelming strength, while openly acknowledging Theo's talent, Thorkel managed to strengthen his own reputation and earn even more respect from the crowd. In one move, he completely shifted public opinion in his favor while also preventing Theo from stealing the spotlight with his confrontation against Navin. Thorkel might have looked like a friendly mountain of muscle, but he was a terrifying political player who viewed the battle for the throne from every possible angle. After their silent contest ended, Theo spent the rest of the evening laughing, drinking and catching up with his fellow graduates, completely unaware of it. Many noble ladies had already decided he was now the most desirable bachelor in the entire hall. While everyone else celebrated, one person watched everything from the upper floor with burning hatred. The Elder Dragon had originally planned to use Navin's reckless behavior to turn the banquet into his own stage, but Thorkel's appearance had ruined those plans. Furious that a mere bastard like Theo kept disrupting the clan's hierarchy, he searched for someone weaker to take his frustration out on. His gaze landed on Captain Evelyn Naravel. For once, she had left her armor behind and appeared in a beautiful dress that highlighted a side of her none of her comrades ever got to see. The dragoons couldn't stop complimenting how gorgeous she looked, but every compliment only made Evelyn more embarrassed. She felt completely out of place without her armor and wished she could change back immediately, just as she was finally starting to relax and enjoy herself. The Elder Dragon walked over and dumped an entire glass of wine onto her head. The instant she heard his voice, years of buried trauma came rushing back. Trembling uncontrollably, Evelyn couldn't even bring herself to look him in the eye. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Abhai grow naturally. As he mocked her for daring to crawl out of her hole and mingle with nobility, Aaron immediately stepped forward, furious that even one of the 9 dragons would treat someone so cruelly. But Evelyn stopped him before things escalated. She knew challenging someone like the Elder Dragon would only end badly. Aaron had never seen the fearless captain, so terrified and couldn't understand what kind of history existed between them. The elder dragon coldly reminded Evelyn that he had warned her long ago never to appear before him again. Then his eyes caught the prosthetic arm hidden beneath her elegant scarf. Without the slightest hesitation, he grabbed it and violently ripped it apart. The precious prosthetic Theo had arranged for her shattered into pieces, before being tossed onto the floor like worthless junk. Mocking it as nothing more than a toy attached to useless flesh, he declared the trash belonged on the ground where it could be crushed underfoot. Finally, he ordered Evelyn to disappear before he personally tore her apart. Swallowing every ounce of humiliation, Evelyn quietly turned around and ran while the elder dragon laughed, saying the room finally smelled better now that she was leaving. Aaron threatened to report everything to the office of the law, but the old man simply laughed at her. If she really wanted to report him, she was free to try. Eventually she'd learn what Ragnar's so-called survival of the fittest truly meant. Meanwhile, Evelyn ran through the palace with tears blurring her vision. Every painful memory from her childhood resurfaced. The elder dragon wasn't just another noble, he was the man she had once called father. As a little girl he had beaten her mercilessly, simply for calling him that, and she never understood why. She thought she had finally overcome those scars. But one encounter shattered all the progress she had made. Still crying, she ran straight into someone standing in her path. It was Julius Ragnar, the demon dragon, confused to see one of his captains fleeing the banquet. He stopped her the moment Evelyn saw a face she trusted. She completely broke down in tears. Back in the banquet hall, Theo and his friends were still enjoying themselves, drinking wine and sharing stories, without the slightest idea that Evelyn had just been publicly humiliated. That cheerful atmosphere was shattered by a blood-curdling scream that echoed throughout the palace, followed by the horrifying sound of bones snapping. Every conversation stopped as the guests rushed toward the source of the commotion. Standing at the center was Julius Ragnar, the demon dragon, gripping the elder dragon's arm with terrifying force. After hearing everything Evelyn had suffered, the moment Julius let go of the old man's shattered arm, the elder dragon stumbled backward while his personal guards immediately surrounded him. Julius coldly reminded him of the promise he had made years ago that anything done to Evelyn would one day be repaid to him. Furious, the elder dragon instantly twisted the situation, accusing Julius of betraying the Ragnar clan and demanding that the law council arrest him for attacking an elder. Within moments, the council surrounded Julius from every direction and formally accused him of assaulting the elder dragon's chief counselor. They warned that even the commander of the white armored dragon cavalry wasn't above Ragnar law. Julius didn't even bother reaching for his weapon. He simply stood there with overwhelming killing intent radiating from every corner of his body, making even the head of the law council break into a cold sweat. Julius then reminded everyone of the sacred oath sworn before Ragnar's elders 4 years earlier. Back then the clan had unanimously agreed that Evelyn Nerval was untouchable, since the elder dragon had deliberately ignored that agreement and humiliated her anyway. Julius considered his retaliation completely justified. By this point, Theo had also reached the scene and quickly pieced together everything that had happened. The moment he heard Evelyn's name, he realized this incident had never occurred in his previous life. His regression had changed history yet again. Evelyn had originally been born as the illegitimate daughter of Wolfgang Ragnar, a man obsessed with preserving pure blood despite fathering her himself. To Wolfgang, Evelyn's very existence was a disgrace that contradicted everything he believed in. He wanted her hidden away forever, so no one would discover the truth. Julius was the one who saved her by bringing her into the white armored dragon cavalry. After recognizing her incredible talent, under his guidance, Evelyn steadily climbed the ranks until she became one of the youngest captains in the unit. But Wolfgang couldn't tolerate watching the daughter he despised become famous. Driven by fear that his own hypocrisy would eventually be exposed, he tried to murder Evelyn under the guise of an accident. He failed to kill her, but severed her left arm, ending her career as a dragoon and forcing her into retirement as the instructor of training ground 4. It wasn't until Theo entered her life, secured her prosthetic arm, and helped her return to active duty that her fate finally changed. Looking at the chaos before him, Theo realized this entire confrontation existed because he had rewritten Evelyn's destiny. Meanwhile, Wolfgang shamelessly continued playing the victim. He loudly accused Julius of abusing the authority granted to one of the 9 dragons and showing contempt toward an elder who had supposedly dedicated decades to protecting Ragnar. Every word only poured more fuel onto Julius's already burning rage. The atmosphere grew so tense that everyone expected blood to spill at any moment, realizing things were about to spiral completely out of control. Theo stepped between the two men. He calmly reminded them that today was supposed to celebrate Ray's birthday, not become the stage for a civil war inside the clan. Out of respect for Theo, Julius forced himself to suppress his anger, though the fury in his eyes never disappeared. Wolfgang, on the other hand, looked visibly irritated that his attempts to provoke Julius had failed. Instead of letting the argument continue, Theo proposed settling everything through Ragnar's ancient duel trial rather than fighting in the middle of a banquet. Both sides could resolve the matter according to clan tradition. Wolfgang immediately rejected the proposal, insisting he was the victim and had absolutely nothing to prove. Theo patiently urged him to reconsider before the disturbance ruined the entire celebration. At that exact moment, another terrifying presence entered the hall. Theo Ragnar, the ice dragon and mistress of Daffodil Palace, finally arrived. Every step she took caused frost to spread across the floor as the temperature dropped throughout the room. Wolfgang tried making excuses yet again, but Neil shut him down before he could finish speaking. She had no interest in hearing anyone's justifications. For the sake of her daughter's birthday, she ordered both men to settle the matter through the duel trial, warning them that her patience had already reached its limit with the ice dragon's decision made. Neither side had much room to argue. The nobles quietly whispered among themselves, most believing Wolfgang's side held the overwhelming advantage even in retirement. His subordinates were elite inspectors with years of combat experience. Wolfgang himself shared that confidence. According to the duel trial's rules, each side would send representatives for the first 2 matches before the leaders settled the dispute in the final duel. Looking at Julius's side, Wolfgang saw only a one-armed captain and a so-called bastard child. In his mind, his men would easily win the first 2 matches, meaning he wouldn't even need to fight. Pretending to reluctantly accept, Wolfgang finally agreed to the duel trial. Soon, the banquet moved outside to a snow-cleared arena where the Law Council officially announced the rules. Manhwa was strictly forbidden. Everyone inside the arena would be protected under Ragnar law, and both sides swore not to seek revenge after the verdict. No matter the outcome among the spectators, Thorkel quietly watched everything unfold with a smile. While sipping his wine, he genuinely admired Theo's quick thinking. If Theo hadn't intervened, Julius would have fallen straight into Wolfgang's trap and likely been politically destroyed through the corrupt legal system. Instead, Theo had found a solution both sides were forced to accept. When the first representatives were called forward, the entire crowd was stunned. Theo calmly stepped into the moonlit arena with his sword in hand. His friends knew he was a monster in battle, but they still couldn't help worrying. Standing opposite him was Gale Sword Beta, the Elder Dragon's personal aide and one of the strongest inspectors in the entire clan. Before the duel, Wolfgang secretly ordered Beta not to show mercy. If killing Theo inside the arena proved impossible, then he wanted Beta to leave the battlefield carrying at least one of Theo's arms as proof, while Wolfgang's side prepared to play dirty. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. Julius stood silently behind Theo, his anger finally replaced by concern that such a gifted young warrior had been dragged into a conflict that should have been his burden alone. Before the duel trial even began, Julius couldn't hide the guilt weighing on him. He apologized to Theo for dragging him into a personal conflict that should have been his burden alone more than once. He questioned whether involving the young lord was really the right decision. Theo, however, never hesitated. With complete confidence, he simply told Julius to trust the process from the very beginning. Theo had a bigger objective in mind. This wasn't just about punishing Wolfgang for what he did to Evelyn, it was also the perfect opportunity to put several plans into motion at once. He intended to settle a decades-old grudge, expose Wolfgang's true nature before the entire clan, and strengthen his own reputation in front of Ragnar's highest-ranking nobles. Every move from this point onward had already been carefully calculated. Once both fighters stepped into the arena, the Law Council referee announced the rules one final time before signaling the start of the first duel. Beta immediately adopted a cautious defensive stance, refusing to underestimate the clan's newest rising star. Theo, on the other hand, wasted no time. He charged straight in, forcing the veteran swordsman to meet him head-on. Their swords collided with explosive force, sending sparks flying in every direction. Since Manhwa was strictly forbidden, neither fighter could rely on techniques or enhancements. Everything depended solely on physical strength. swordsmanship, and experience. The impact pushed both men backward, but neither stayed still for long. They instantly dashed forward again, colliding over and over at incredible speed to the spectators. The duel became almost impossible to follow. All they could see were flashes of steel and hear the constant ringing of blades crashing together. Even Beta couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Theo wasn't simply surviving against him, he was matching him blow for blow still. Beta trusted that decades of real battlefield experience would eventually create the opening he needed. That opportunity seemed to arrive when Beta suddenly kicked dirt and loose stones into the air, creating a cloud that blocked Theo's vision. The veteran immediately capitalized on the distraction, believing he had finally outsmarted the youngster. He lunged forward with a clean, decapitating strike. Out of respect for Theo's status as a successor candidate, Beta even intended to make it as painless as possible. But the instant his sword swept toward Theo's neck, Theo calmly leaned backward with a confident smile. The opening had been intentional all along. He had predicted Beta would rely on his experience and commit fully to the attack. With Beta's arm now completely overextended, Theo gained a perfect chance to counter at the last possible moment. Beta sensed something was wrong and desperately threw himself backward. Even so, he noticed something even stranger. Theo had deliberately stopped his own finishing strike. The opportunity to end the duel had been right there, yet he chose not to take it. The reason had nothing to do with mercy. Suddenly, the familiar voices inside Theo's head returned. They whispered endlessly, urging him to kill everyone who had mocked, abandoned, and betrayed him. For a brief moment, his vision blurred as violent impulses overwhelmed his thoughts. Beta could tell something had changed. Theo stood completely still, almost as if he were fighting someone invisible. Unsure whether this was another trap or genuine hesitation, Beta refused to fall for the same trick twice. Eventually, pride got the better of him. Convinced he had figured Theo out, the inspector charged again with full killing intent. This time, Theo answered the voices himself. He quietly told them to be silent. If blood had to be spilled, it would happen because of his own decision, not because some mysterious force demanded it. With sheer willpower, he forced the madness back into the darkness. The instant Theo regained complete control, the entire battle changed. His movements became noticeably faster, sharper, and far more aggressive. Beta barely had time to react before Theo unleashed a relentless barrage of sword strikes from every direction. Steel flashed so rapidly that even experienced spectators struggled to keep up. One devastating slash cleanly severed Beta's arm. Panic instantly replaced the confidence on the veteran's face. Desperately trying to create distance, he defended himself with his remaining arm. But Theo refused to let up. Every escape route was shut down until a final overwhelming slash blasted Beta completely out of the arena. The force behind the attack was so monstrous that spectators sitting behind him would have been caught in the impact if Theo Ragnar, the ice dragon, hadn't stepped in and frozen the shock wave before it reached the audience. Even she couldn't hide her admiration. Without using mana, Theo had carved apart the battlefield with nothing but raw physical strength. Beta crashed unconscious into a massive crater, his arm gone and his uniform reduced to scraps. Seeing there was no longer any point continuing, the referee immediately declared Theo Ragnar the winner of the opening match. As the crowd erupted into thunderous applause, Theo wasn't celebrating. Instead, he remained focused on the unsettling feeling lingering inside him. The bloodlust he had experienced was unlike anything before. It felt almost as if someone or something was guiding his hatred toward a specific destination. Oddly enough, surrendering to those emotions had dramatically increased his power. The temptation was obvious. If he ever learned to control that darkness without losing himself, he could become vastly stronger. But he also understood the danger. The same force that empowered him could one day consume him completely. For now, he simply buried those thoughts and turned his attention back to the duel trial. After the arena was repaired, everyone naturally assumed Theo would step aside and let another representative fight the second round. Instead, he stunned the entire audience by volunteering again. Wolfgang immediately interpreted the decision as arrogance and responded by sending out one of his strongest subordinates, the legendary Sword of Mystics and former Dragon Gate Swordmaster, Regression. Even the Lanka siblings became excited after seeing the elderly warrior casually carrying an absurdly massive sword without relying on mana. Sitting nearby, however, Remington looked far less optimistic. Unlike Beta, Page wasn't just another elite inspector, he was a famous elder whose strength was respected throughout Ragnar. Wolfgang clearly wasn't interested in simply winning anymore. He wanted Theo dead as soon as the referee started the second match. Everyone expected another fierce battle. Instead, Theo calmly raised his hand and surrendered. The entire arena froze, even Paige stood there speechless. Theo politely explained that a mid-ranked inspector simply couldn't compare to a legendary elder, making the fight unnecessary. Although Paige looked visibly disappointed, the referee had no choice but to award him the victory. Only then did everyone realize Theo's real strategy. By intentionally sacrificing one round, he removed the strongest obstacle from the equation, while forcing Wolfgang, whose arm Julius had already broken, to fight in the decisive final match himself. When Theo returned to his side, Evelyn immediately apologized for dragging him into such a painful family matter. Theo gently reassured her that this wasn't her burden to carry alone. His words brought back every person who had changed her life. Julius had recognized her talent when everyone else rejected her and welcomed her into the White Armor Dragon Cavalry. Even after she lost her arm, he never stopped believing she could return. Then Theo entered her life, gave her a new purpose, secured her prosthetic arm, and helped her reclaim the future she thought she'd lost forever. Looking back, Evelyn realized her past was filled with suffering, but it was also filled with people who genuinely cared about her. She could no longer keep running from the man who had destroyed her childhood. Before Julius could enter the arena for the final duel, Evelyn stopped himself. She declared that she was done living as a victim. This fight belonged to her alone. The referee approved the last-minute substitution, and the one-armed captain stepped into the arena wearing the same elegant dress from the banquet, rapier in hand. The moment Wolfgang saw his illegitimate daughter standing across from him, he burst into mocking laughter and asked if she had come to beg for mercy. Evelyn never reacted. She calmly looked him straight in the eyes and uttered a single word that shook the entire arena: father. The audience fell silent. Rumors of Wolfgang's illegitimate child had circulated for years, but no one imagined it was Evelyn. Desperate to save himself, Wolfgang immediately called her delusional. But Evelyn finally exposed everything. She revealed years of abuse, the beating she suffered as a child, and how he later tried to murder her after she became a respected captain just to erase the stain on his reputation. Enraged, Wolfgang completely lost control and openly declared that as an elder of House Ragnar, he had every right to erase his own disgrace. Without realizing it, he had practically confessed to every act. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Apai. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.